Silence no more. Silence no
Hello, this is Janet Morana, Executive Director of Priests for Life. Welcome to Just Ask Janet. Well, today is Veterans Day. And of course, in the secular world, people think about, oh, we're off from work today. Oh, the banks are closed. Oh, no mail delivery today. And there's all the Veterans Day sales. But that's not the reason for the Veterans Day. We should pause right now and reflect about what Veterans Day is about. It's honoring our veterans who have past and present fought for our freedom, the very freedoms we enjoy in our country, the right to vote, the right to freely express ourselves. You know, America, we have the most freedoms of any country in the entire world. And today is the day to pause and reflect and thank both our veterans who are deceased, our veterans who are still alive and with us, and our active duty military today, because they're the ones who are standing on those lines out all over the world and providing us protection and our freedom. Well, here at Priests for Life, I sent out a little email to my staff last week, and I said, come on, Veterans Day is coming up. Do you people have anyone in your family, past or present, that fought in the service, whether it was during wartime or not? They're both important because when it's at peacetime, you know, it's our military that keeps the peace around the world. All right. It's the military that protects our borders. Like, for example, did you ever think about a branch of service pretty much forgotten by a lot of people is the Coast Guard? How do you think we keep a lot of the drugs from coming on, smuggled into our country? It's the Coast Guard. And they make sure that there's a lot of boat safety and they protect us. And that's just one branch, of course. We know it's the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, right? Et cetera. And the Marines. Let's not forget the Marines, Semper Fidelis. So when I sent out this little message, I said to staff, if you have a picture of a loved one in your family who either is currently active duty or had served as a veteran, could be deceased, could be just retired, send me your picture and maybe a sentence about them so that today, on Veterans Day, we can honor them. So please join me right now. And before we look at the pictures, I want to add one more thought. When you see anybody in uniform, military person, do you thank them for their service? I know I always do. I especially see a lot of them when I'm going through an airport. Always thank someone who's in a military uniform. Say thank you for your service, because you know what? It means a lot to them, because I know people who have family members that are currently active duty. And when they are thanked like that, it really touches them. So let's not make a practice. If you haven't been doing it, you'll start doing it. All right, so let's take a look, of course, at the pictures. And I thought I would start first with my dad, okay? So this is a picture of my dad, and he turned 18. So he actually enlisted in World War II before he even turned 18. He went off to boot camp before he turned 18. And he turned 18 on a transport over to Europe. And in fact, my dad was an only child. So based on criteria back then, he didn't have to serve. They didn't have to take him. But he wanted to serve. He wanted to go and protect our country. And he fought in 3rd Army under General Patton. And my dad, he always talks about that from the south of France all the way north, they marched as an army, foot soldiers. And he was hurt at the Battle of the Bulge. He actually got frozen feet. And he was flown out over to England to a hospital over there. And I always remember him telling us that they had to literally cut the boots off his feet, because that's how bad his feet and legs were. But they did save his feet. And of course, my dad always walked with a limp when he was in his dress shoes, because his feet, to the day he died, always bothered him. And that was from getting frozen feet in World War II at the Battle of Bulge. But you know something? Another story about my dad. He had gotten medals for serving in the army on General Patton. But you know something? He never got his medals. He didn't want them. He said, "No, no, no, I don't want the medals." And I remember years later, I said, "Daddy, you told me you earned medals, but you never got them. Why?" He said, "I did not need a medal to do what I did. I did what I did because that was what I was supposed to do. That was my job, enlisting and fighting for our country." And one thing my father always taught me, when we turned 18, boy, he made sure we were registered to vote. And every year, I always make sure I never skip an election because of my dad. He says, "That's what we went to war for, Janet, is the right to vote and our freedom." So that's my dad, John Arthur Watson. And a lot of people think I look a lot like my dad. What do you think, huh? I look like my dad? I think so. I resemble him a lot. So I love you, Daddy. Of course, my dad is no longer with us. He passed away in 2001. But he was a great dad and a great role model. And I love you, Daddy. Mwah. Okay, let's take the next. Okay, so here, next picture after my dad. Let's look at the next one. That's my dad, John Watson. All right, now the next one. This is Father Frank's father. This is Joseph Pavone, and he was recommended for the Navy School of Music. And because Father Frank's dad played the trombone, he enlisted and attended the School of Music and was placed in the Navy band. The band followed the admiral to all events he attended. They played for President Eisenhower's inauguration, amongst many other events in Washington, D.C. And of course, Father Frank's father, Joe, continued to play after discharge for many, many social events. And I can tell you, he used to always bring his trombone to our Priest for Life Christmas party. Of course, we haven't seen him at one of our Christmas parties because of COVID, because Father Frank's dad, he's now in his upper 80s, but he still can play that trombone a little bit. So that's an interesting story that he actually played. He was in the band that played at President Eisenhower's inauguration. So imagine that. That's another interesting fact. Okay, there you are, Joe Pavone. Great picture. All right, next up is this is Theresa Watson. This is her dad, and he was in the Army. But she doesn't know much about his service, apparently, and this is very common. He got an honorable discharge from World War II. This is something they found among his papers. Okay, and his name was Ralph. There he is, Ralph Pavone. And she said, my dad never even spoke about his service. And I have to say that's very common with especially World War II veterans. My dad really didn't talk about his service either, unless we asked questions or we asked facts to drill down. So Theresa, of course, her father's deceased, so she didn't know too much about his years of service. But that's Theresa Watson, who's also, by the way, my sister-in-law, but she's our executive manager here at Priest for Life. So that's her dad, Ralph Pavone. Okay. All right. Next, we have pictures from Evelyn Cruz, who's in our finance department. And this first picture, this is April Ramirez, and she is currently a master sergeant, so she's active duty currently. All right. And then there's another picture of her husband, Nelson Ramirez, and he's a staff sergeant. The funny thing about these two is, of course, Evelyn is very proud of her niece and nephew. And the nephew, he served 12 years in the Air Force. And of course, April has been 20 years in the Air Force, and she's still active duty. And this couple, they met in the Air Force, and they met at Andrews Air Force Base, where they were both stationed. So that's the Ramirez family, which Evelyn Cruz's niece and nephew, and she is so, so proud of them. Look at that. That's a beautiful picture. Okay. Okay, next up, this is George Palmer, and this is the father of Leslie Palmer, who is our director of communications here at Priest for Life. And this is an interesting fact about George Palmer here. He served, obviously, in World War II, but his ship was supposed to be at Pearl Harbor on December 7th. Imagine that. But his ship stopped 100 miles out away from Pearl Harbor because his ship had to refuel another ship. Can you imagine that? Has his ship been in Pearl Harbor, maybe Leslie wouldn't be here. She wouldn't have been born. He could have been killed in Pearl Harbor with so many of those other soldiers. So it was one of those fate things that his ship stopped 100 miles away from Pearl Harbor out in the Pacific somewhere to refuel another ship. And that's how George Palmer survived World War II. Very, very interesting fact, right? Okay, let's see what we have next. Okay, let's see. The next is, I think this is Tracy's family. And this looks like, I think this is Nathan, right? He's currently serving. This is Nathan. He's a senior airman with the U.S. Air Force, and this is her son-in-law, Nathan Ortiz, married to her daughter, Tracy Kirk's, our receptionist, and married to her daughter, Skylar. And this is Nathan Ortiz. Nice picture. Very nice. Okay, now we're going to go back. This is also Tracy's family. This is her dad. This is Tracy Kirk, our receptionist. This is her father, Roy Maston, and he was a petty officer, 3rd class in the Navy. And that's a nice picture of her dad. And then she also has a picture of her father-in-law, William Kirk, and he also served in he served in the Air Force as a master sergeant. So he served in the U.S. Air Force, master sergeant. Nice picture of him. Okay, let's see. And then next we have Judy from our data entry department. And she sent us several pictures. These are photographs of my husband's side of the family. They come from a long line of military service. So the first one is J.D. Roberts. This is Judy Roberts. This is her husband's family. He was in the Marines, and he served from 1944 to 1946. He was stationed in the Philippines as one of his duty stations. So and Rick's family has a long tradition of military service. My family has had several who served as well, but Judy didn't have pictures of her family. But we also will say thank you, Judy, for your side of the family that served. Okay, so then we had a picture of Rick's father, and I spoke about him already. And let's see who else we have. Oh, Mike Roberts, that's Rick's brother. He served in the Army from 1968 to 1969. He was in a combat wounded vet, and he was wounded in Vietnam. Then we have Nathan Roberts. That's Mike Roberts' son. He's a Marine, and he recently retired after 24 years of service. After 24 years of service as a Marine. And then finally, she has Joshua Roberts, which is Mike Roberts' son, who's also a Marine. So her family has really a nice history here. And she also wanted me to mention these people. She has no photographs, but Maurice Roberts, Rick's oldest brother, served in the Army from 1967 to 68. Mike Kelly, her brother, was in the Navy. Justin Humphreys, her nephew, was in the Marines. And Dylan Humphreys, another nephew, also served in the Marines. So here at Priest for Life, we do have military past and present and active duty. And so on this Veterans Day, besides running out for the sales, why don't we all should be pausing and pray for our military, pray for those who have gone before us, who are deceased, pray for those who are still alive but have retired, veterans, and pray especially for our active duty who are making sure to keep us safe. So I hope you enjoyed our little trip down memory lane for my staff here. And why don't you take this moment on Veterans Day to ask your own family, find out in your family who served in the military. Ask to take out some pictures. This is a great thing to do, tonight. When you're sitting around, instead of watching TV, get out those family albums and let's talk about the great people we have in our own families who did military service. Again, to keep our country the great country we are. Well, this is Janet Morana, Executive Director of Priest for Life. Happy Veterans Day and God bless.